Most people would rather regurgitate rhetoric, talking points, slogans, hashtags, phrases that make them feel emotionally superior to you. Oh, you're not voting that way because you don't care about the children. You don't care about the environment or intellectually superior. You are just voting that way because you're stupid, because you're uneducated. People would rather do that than to actually do their due diligence, have discipline and fortitude to do their homework, to research statistics, facts, evidence, logic, and data, because that takes time, effort, energy, and it does not feed your ego or emotions. Now, you might ask me, why do I care? 10 years ago, I really didn't. That's because anything you do today is affected directly or indirectly by politics. Think about it. You can't get a damn Big Mac without wearing a mask because people are afraid of COVID because they turn on the news. You can't watch a damn sports game without being lectured about politics. You can't watch TV. You can't watch a new movie. You can't do anything without being lectured about damn politics. Most of the opinions that these individuals have are based upon emotion. They're not based upon any factual data, research, facts, or evidence. You have more people posting their opinions all over social media, but yet they don't know what the hell they're talking about. 99.999% of people, regardless if they're liberal, conservative, libertarian, centrist, apolitical, whatever they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Let me give you a good example. People literally want to increase prices of your power. They want to get rid of the fossil fuel industry. They want to destroy the economy economically because they believe human intervention in the environment is causing deforestation, is causing prices to rise, things in the third world are getting worse, the world's going to shit. Other than humans being ignorant morons, if you actually look at metrics, evidence, and facts, you will see that pertaining to humans subduing their environment, things are improving. Let me give you a couple facts that you will not hear on the mainstream media, the doom and gloom mainstream media. According to the World Bank, only 30% of the people in the developing world had access to clean water in 1950. In 2005, 80% had access. Now, how does clean water work if you don't have wells? It works because you have fossil fuels. You have coal. You have oil powering those irrigation systems. See, that's dangerous. People thinking we should get rid of the fossil fuel industry. That will cut off a supply of clean drinking water to people in the developing world. Number two, on average, developing countries have increased their calorie intake from 2,463 to 2,663 calories over the last 10 years, an increase of 8%. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, food prices have fallen dramatically. I looked at the wheat price index. It showed you England and Wales, the United Kingdom. According to the IMF, the world market price for wheat per bushel was cheaper than ever before at $4 per bushel. And this was in 2000 compared to 18 in 1950. So every year since 1950, the price for wheat per bushel has gotten cheaper. It's at an all-time low. According to the United Nations and Food and Agricultural Organization, global forest cover has increased from 30.04% of the globe, if you use land area in 1950, to 30.89% in 1994, an increase of 0.85 percentage points over the last 44 years. So you hear, oh man, humans are destroying the forest. But actually, before 1900, when you had James Watt invent the steam engine, which used fossil fuels, that was the beginning. In the Industrial Revolution, humans would cut down wood for energy to power their boats, to power their heat, and things of that nature. So actually, since humans have used fossil fuels, the amount of global forest has increased. Why is most research negative? If you look at most think tanks, most mainstream media outlets, you talk to most academia, professors, people who study these things, it's always negative. Well, that's because a lot of the research, especially government research, is publicly funded. That means there will be expectations as to the relevance of the research to society. Research basically has built-in lopsidedness. Imperfections exist, but is it a problem? Is the situation getting worse or better? That's the fundamental question. Has it also been bad before human activity? Most environmental problems are incredibly complex and can be difficult to accept or reject a theory within a short period of time. You got to realize these people have an agenda. When they work for an organization that is paid by the scientific lobby, which wants the Green New Deal, for instance, they have to look for data that backs up doom and gloom. You can look more into this. I'm just trying to basically do a summary. I have a lot more, but I don't want to get into everything. I don't want to make this like a 50-minute video. I just want to get my point across succinctly and substantively. According to the UN, the real objective of development should be to create an enabling environment for people to enjoy long, healthy, and creative lives. To measure this, the UN introduced the Human Development Index, which measures how long people can expect to live, how much knowledge they can acquire, and how high a living standard they can achieve. According to the UN Procurement Division, despite women in developing countries in 1950 averaging more than 6 kids compared to 3 today, the world population is increasing. Why? It is mainly due to a dramatic fall in the death rate as a result of improved access to food, medicine, clean water, and sanitation. This is the world population from 1750 to 2001. Basically, despite women in countries that are developed having an average of 3 kids today compared to 6 kids in the past, the population is increasing. It's because people are not dying like they used to. 60% of the population growth comes from just 12 countries. India, Pakistan, and China are at the top of the list, adding 563, 203, and 187 million more people in the next 50 years. In 100 years, from 1950 to 100 years from now, China's population will have increased 160%. India's will have quadrupled, and the population of Pakistan and Nigeria will have increased 9-fold. And that's crazy because Nigeria is the second largest country in terms of population in the world. On the other hand, in 1950, industrial nations had 32% of the population to just 13 in 2050. Europe accounted for 22% of the world population in 1950, while today it only accounts for 13%. Africa, on the other hand, has increased from 9% in 1950 to 13% today. By 2050, this is the United Nations, not me. Europe's share of the world population will shrink to below 7%, while Africa's will grow to 22%. Africa and Europe will have changed places as regards to relative population size. What about life expectancy? It is estimated that life expectancy of the whole world in 1900 was still around 30. In 1950, people lived for an average of 46.5 years. In 1998, 67 years. In 2016, it was 72 years. So life expectancy has more than doubled within the last 100 years. This is according to the World Bank. According to the UN, the world's agricultural production has more than doubled since 1961, and in developing countries, it has more than tripled. We produce 23% more food per capita than we did in 1961, and the growth in agricultural crops per person in developing countries has grown by as much as 52%. The price of food fell by more than 2/3 from 1957 to 2001. Basically, I have more food than ever, even though the population has doubled since 1961. This is according to the United Nations. According to the UN, the population of children in the developing world considered to be undernourished has fallen from 40% to 30% over the past 15 years, and is expected to still fall further to 24% in 2020. How is all of this possible? The Green Revolution. The secret of the Green Revolution was to get more food out of each and every piece of soil. It was the vision of Norman Borlaug, who later received the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on high-yield variety of crops. In his laboratories in Mexico, attention was focused in particular on the major types of cereals: rice, corn, and wheat. Characteristic of these modern varieties is that they generate earlier in the year, grow faster, and are more resistant to disease and drought. They often have shorter stems than the old varieties, so that most of the plant nutrients ends up in the grains. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, grain makes up 30% of the average person's diet. The fact that plants generate earlier and grow more quickly means that in many parts of the world, it is possible to harvest 2 or 3 crops a year. Rice no longer takes 150 days to mature, and many varieties can do so in as little as 90 days. Also, wheat has become resistant to most diseases such as mildew and rust, which means a lot in developing countries where farmers often cannot afford pesticides. The new varieties of wheat now account for almost 90% of production in developing countries. Since 1960, the new varieties have led to a 30% plus increase in yields and are responsible for 20 to 50% of total increased productivity. The second thing that has led to more food, cheaper prices, and less humans dying is irrigation and controlled water supply. Building dams have become more widespread. The production of irrigated fields having almost doubled from 10.5% in 1961 to over 18% in 1997. Irrigation renders the soil far more fertile. It has enabled the Egyptians to get almost twice the wheat yield of the average developing country. Irrigation also makes it possible to harvest 2 or 3 times a year. This is why irrigated land contributes as much as 40% of the Earth's food, even though it only accounts for 18% of the total agricultural landmass. Diesel fuel powers most irrigation systems. So all these people, oh man, we need to get rid of diesel. We need to get rid of fossil fuels. But yet they say they want to get people out of poverty. How are you supposed to get people out of poverty when they don't have a controlled water supply that is able to filter out things out of the water? That way people can have clean drinking water. It takes electricity to do that. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, in developing countries, rice production has increased by 122%, corn by 159%, and wheat by 229%. Again, these developing countries are third world countries. What about raw materials? Things that we need in our homes, like aluminum, cement, nitrogen, things like that. The total economic expense for raw materials is 1.1% of global GDP, and 60% of our expenses concern raw materials with more than 200 years of consumption left. According to the publication The Economist, prices of the vast majority of industrial products have been dropping over the past 150 years. Since 1845, prices have fallen by almost 80%. Let's start with cement. Each year we spend $111 billion on cement. Thus, the cost of cement constitutes 34% of our total expenditure on raw materials, making it the single largest entry in our raw material budget. Not because cement is expensive, but because we use so much of it. Cement is a chemical binder made mainly from limestone, and when mixed with sand or gravel, it produces mortar or concrete. Although we use more than 1.5 billion tons of cement a year, the materials to make cement are available in many parts of the world in virtually unlimited quantities with reserves for more than 1,000 years. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Food production is crucially dependent on three resources: soil, water, and fertilizer. The essential fertilizers were mainly provided by manure. Today, about 6% of our raw material expenditure is used on nitrogen. Nitrogen is absolutely essential for food production, since it is an integral part of the chlorophyll molecule, making plants green and enabling them to transform sunlight to starch through photosynthesis. But today, nitrogen is almost exclusively synthesized from air, and since air contains about 78% nitrogen, there are no limits to consumption. Phosphorus is a constituent of DNA and consequently indispensable for all forms of life. The phosphorus reserves stand at about 90 years of current consumption. Recently, geological surveyors found reserves adding 180 years near the coast of Florida. Potassium has 357 years of consumption at current levels. Again, I've done hours and hours of research. The point is, things are getting better. And they're sustainable. You look at the reserves we have. But to surmise it, life expectancy is the highest it's ever been. The population is the largest it's ever been. There is more food available than there has ever been. And it's cheaper than it has ever been. Not only in the US and Europe, but in Africa and underdeveloped countries. Yet, according to the media, everything's getting worse. Everything is going to hell. Everything's going to shit. But if you look at the data, you look at the evidence, it tells you a completely different story. That's why you have to look at this before basing your entire economic policy and environmental policy on a Green New Deal.